Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Monica Ortiz Uribe. The Organ Mountains are the iconic backdrop to the city of Las Cruces. They're the outdoor playground for nature lovers, hikers, bikers, and climbers of all sorts. In Congress right now, there are two bills that propose to make the Organ Mountains a national monument, but not everybody agrees on which of the two bills should go through. So to discuss the options, I've invited two guests with two different points of view. Todd Garrison, he is the sheriff for Dona County.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome, Sheriff.
Thank you very much.
And David Souls, who is an engineer at White Sands Missile Range, who's hiked and biked, hiked and hunted through
little biking
through all over Dona County since
Yes.
Since you were a child. So welcome to you both. So there are two different bills in Congress right now. One is sponsored by Representative Steve Pierce, and the other one by the Senators Tom Udall and Martin Heinrich. And the most obvious difference between these two bills really is the amount of land that they cover. So, so to make that clear, we're going to bring a couple maps to look at what exactly they cover. So this, we should be looking at the map by the senators, and as we can see, it's quite a bit of land. It's about 500,000 acres within four different sections of land. The teal is what indicates the proposed monument land. So there's some of it right around the Organ Mountains, and then west of the city of Las Cruces, north and south of I-10. The bottom portion comes within about 5 miles of the border with Mexico. So that's the Senator's map. And Representative Pierce's bill indicates a much smaller section. If I'm not mistaken, it's about 60,000 acres, and it just covers an area around the Organ Mountains. So, so Sheriff Garrison, I understand that you support Representative Pierce's bill, which only includes the area around the Organ Mountains, and I'd like you to tell us why.
Yes, ma'am. I think having the monument or protecting some of the lands, that's a great idea. My concern is just the amount of land that we're taking up on the West Mesa, being so close to the border, and for my concern is just that until we have a secure border, we don't know what's coming across. We're not sure what kind of a criminal element's coming across, the drugs, different things like that. And having such a large piece of land that's included in a monument, it makes it more difficult to patrol, makes it more difficult to on public safety issues and concerns for the community.
So according to U.S. Border Patrol statistics, they show that the New Mexico border has among the lowest apprehension rates compared to the rest of the entire southern border. And that may be an indication that the illegal traffic coming across the New Mexico border is less than, say, southern Texas or Arizona. But so what is your concern with what's going on at the New Mexico border?
My concern would be, I guess it depends on who you ask or who you talk to as far as those numbers. I think those numbers change. They're not, I think we have a lot of issues with, because of money concerns, pulling people off of tracks when they're following, drug smugglers across it. Because we're out of time on the clock, we don't have people replacing officers who are tracking criminals at this time. That those kinds of things have occurred. They are occurring. So I have disagreed with the numbers or those issues along the border for a long time. And I've opposed this issue for the past 7-8 years since it began. Not protecting the monuments or the specific areas, just such a large piece of land so close to the border.
Right. Well, tell me about how often your deputies are out there. How often do they get called out on incidents, and what sort of things have you encountered in the region of land between I-10 and the border?
I can't give you specific numbers on how many, but we've gone to calls for people who have died or succumbed to the elements out there crossing with groups of people. We've had issues of burglaries, drugs, different things like that have occurred out there. And as far as the amount of patrols, we have more than we used to. With Operation Stone Garden and the funding we've received, we were able to get out there and patrol the area more often. And I believe that us being out there patrolling has reduced the numbers and has helped reduce the numbers now.
So can you clarify what the difference is between what your deputies do and what the Border Patrol does when it comes to land that's near the border?
I think Border Patrol would be out there looking for drugs and for also illegals crossing illegally. Primarily our job is to respond to criminal activity, or if we're out there looking for stuff like that, it's primarily for drugs and different things like that, responding to criminal acts.
Can you give me some examples of maybe some recent incidents and specific examples in the last few months that cause you pause and say, we don't want more of this to occur?
Well, along the border in New Mexico, or just here? I mean, I think along the border in New Mexico, we've had a number of break-ins, different things like that, burglaries at different locations. I mean, we don't have that many dwellings in Dona County, but I know that you have the identified aircraft that are flying across the border, dropping off loads of drugs. I mean, I don't think anybody has an accurate number on how many of those are actually coming across the border. I guess my issue and my concern is, until we have more clearly defined that and we know more about what's happening out here, I look at what's happened along the U.S.-Mexico border in other states where we have monuments or wilderness areas, and what is going on there, and that is what causes me concern here.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. There's another monument in the Arizona, in the state of Arizona, near the border, the Oregon Cactus Pipe National Monument.
Right.
Tell me about, have you looked into that and what you know about that?
I'm part of the Southwest Border Sheriff's Coalition, which is a group of sheriffs along the U.S. border in California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, and we talk to the sheriffs in different counties and the problems that they have that they come across. I think our numbers, we don't focus on illegal crossers because we don't have any idea, or that information, who's here legally or not. We have no idea. So, as law enforcement, we respond to criminal acts and criminal activity. That would be the murders or the people dying in the deserts that succumb to the elements, or robberies, rapes, break-ins, those kinds of things. That's what we respond to.
Okay, but
So,
you don't have like a statistics or sort of a number, an idea of just how frequent these incidents are, and how often your sheriffs are having to respond in that particular area?
It's lumped in with everything else we keep track of in the counties. I mean, it's part of the burglaries, it's part of the rapes and the different issues and concerns that happen. It's just lumped into one number for the entire county.
Okay.
So to specifically separate it from what's going on in different places would be difficult to do.
So the incidents that you're responding to, they can be all over the county,
Right.
not just at the
Yes,
border. Okay. So another one of your concerns, I understand, is the deputies' access to the chunk of land north of the border, should it be designated as a monument. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
correct? So I wanted to bring up language within the bill and see and ask you to tell me what's missing, or what additional would you like to see. So we're going to bring up some of the text from the bill, and this is going to be, the bill is proposed by the two senators. So what it says is that nothing in this act prevents the ability to use motorized access within a wilderness area while in pursuit of a suspect. And this is referring to law enforcement and to Border Patrol. There's another part also in in the senator's bill that says mechanical transport shall be prohibited in the area except as necessary for the administration of the area, including the conduct of law enforcement and border security activities in the area. There's one more that I want to bring up. It says, nothing in this subsection precludes the Secretary from allowing the area described installation and maintenance of communication or surveillance infrastructure necessary for law enforcement or border security activities. So it seems like from that text that law enforcement will have access to patrol in the area. There will be infrastructure. And so I wonder what is missing in there for you?
I think there's a large amount of land, and there's, nobody's sure on what roads are going to be closed, what closures are going to occur now, what closures will occur in the future when we see need to. And I think the concern that law enforcement has, and I'll be honest, I was never contacted or nobody spoke to me regarding any of this. I think most of the speak for law enforcement has been with Border Patrol or other federal agencies. Nobody has ever come down and talked to me or sat down and spoken with me about this. I spoke to two of the senator's people last week for the first time. So, I mean, that, those things do bring concern. I've seen other areas where we were told certain things would happen, but then when those things happen, we have issues and problems. It took me almost 6 years to get a site approved on the in the mountains down there for a radio tower. When I had officer safety concerns and we had an incident where an officer was being shot at down there, and we couldn't even get on the radio. So the concerns that were brought up, it moved at a snail's pace to finally get that. That took 6 years to finally get a tower up there. And then one of the vendors was out there one day and had to pull off the road 12 inches and was cited for that. So I mean, I have concerns as far as how things are really going to work. I think we can say one thing. I think the biggest part of this, once this bill is passed, then other things will be decided. And I'm just not all for passing bills and then deciding all the details later on. I don't think that's worked well up to this point. So,
do you know why it took so long to get that communications tower up?
With the NEPA studies and all the different issues they had to do, and which I understand, but still, my concern was for the safety of the officers in this county and for the citizens down here that we were trying to take care of, and needing a radio tower set up there so we just had better communications. Not only did it assist us, but it also assisted a lot of the federal agencies who are able to use that tower now too. So, I mean, it was something that needs to be done as the community grows and as we progress and move forward. And sometimes it just does not happen very fast. So, those are concerns. I am all for protecting, the different areas we need to protect. I'm not for not doing that. My concern for this area is just a large amount of land that's out there, and there's too many unknowns.
Very good, very good. And has this communication tower helped since it's been installed?
Yes, it has definitely helped.
Okay, very good, very good.
It's an ongoing process.
So is there anything else that you would like to see in terms of the monument proposal and its accommodations to law enforcement in either bill?
I think, if protecting the Oregon mountains is a great idea, and I know we want to protect some of the lands and different things out here. I think those are great ideas. I just think that when law enforcement is kept from an area or unable to do our job the way we need to, then there's issues that would come along with that. I mean, this monument is very close to one of the most deadliest cities in our nation, or in our country right now. I mean, being in Juarez, which has had the issues and problems it's had for how many years now?
You mean in Mexico?
In Mexico, yeah. I mean in Mexico. I'm sorry, and it's very close to that. I mean, the issues that are occurring in other states where the monuments along the border don't have areas that have been that big and had that many issues and problems, and so it's a concern. It's just a concern, and I think it's a viable concern for the people of this community and this country.
Very good. Well, thank you, Sheriff. I'm gonna turn it over to David and talk to David, who supports the senator's bill, right, which is the larger chunk of land. So I want to start just by asking you to tell me about your personal history with this land, and to ask you if you've ever felt unsafe exploring it.
Well, I grew up in Las Cruces. In fact, I still live in the house that I grew up in, which I think is somewhat unique. And I've watched places that I used to be able to hunt. In fact, as a child, we'd go to picnics at a cave down by the river, La Cueva, and things like that. Went camping as a Boy Scout. Probably in my mid-teens, I started hunting, and that's what really got me to see a lot more of these lands. And of course, there are roads through much of it that are accessible, and then you can hike to do that. So I can remember 30 years ago when the lands the sheriff's talking about primarily down at the border first became what's called a wilderness study area. And personally, I thought that was great. Now we'll stop some of the off-roading and things that were already going on back then. And so I have a connection, I think, to all of the different facets that are there. But it started with that hunting, and then when I heard about things like 6 or 7 years ago when there was legislation, I didn't understand why it's been more than 30 years and we're still studying this. So I can relate to things taking a while with the federal government, right? I never saw those changes happen, but I was encouraged when I thought it was going to happen. But then the discussion moved to a monument, and I think like a lot of people, at first I was thinking of White Sands that's got a fence around it and a fee to go into it and that sort of thing. I wasn't all that comfortable at first. So I've spent the last few years trying to understand more what a BLM managed monument is all about. And it turns out the land would be managed very much like it is today. In fact, almost identically. There's still a public input process. The BLM still does resource management plans. Every time that happens, I think law enforcement's concerns are brought into the discussion. So I think all of that's good. I think there's a lot of sense from people that haven't looked at this carefully that something dramatic's going to happen. And really the main things that will happen, in my point of view, is the lands can no longer be disposed of. I think that's the government's term for selling them or getting rid of them somehow so they're no longer public land. And you can't do extractive uses like mining or drilling and those kinds of things, except the ones that are already occurring. Existing rights stay the same. And then of course it brings economic value to the community, which I think is a very positive thing. The big difference between a BLM and a Park Service monument is that with BLM monuments, it's not just one single purpose like White Sands. I can't go hunt in White Sands now. With a BLM monument, hunting would continue, grazing would continue. Essentially every recreational opportunity that I'm aware of would continue the same way it is today.
Well, tell me about what makes this land so special. I mean, what are the scenic and historical highlights?
First, I have to say I'm an engineer at White Sands. I don't have any real background in history or archaeology or any of those things, so I'm not an expert on that. Neither am I in law enforcement, and my wife wanted to be sure that I'm very supportive of the sheriff because we appreciate law enforcement too. I've learned a lot of that in the last few years, a lot of the history of the area. It turns out, I think most people know we have a Trackways National Monument here now, and that is to recognize these tracks that were laid down. I think the number's like 280 million years ago. And of note, I'm told that's the Permian period, which is the same time frame as the Permian Basin, which is where they drill for oil over in eastern New Mexico and West Texas. So over there it's subsurface, that's right. But here it's fossils and trackways, so it's kind of on top of the surface. And if you go back that far, this was near the equator. There was a sea here. That's how much the earth has changed in that time frame. So there's a lot of that even outside of trackways that's there. And then if you fast forward to what we relate to more, which is mammals and things like that. Again, I think the name is the Holocene period, and the late Holocene period was maybe 10 to 14,000 years ago. And there are caves here where they found the remains of a giant ground sloth. This is near Aden Crater, down where you're talking about. I think they found it in the 1920s. And it was buried in bat guano, and it's the best preserved giant ground sloth anyone's found anywhere in the world. It's on display in the Peabody Museum at Yale University.
That was found here.
Correct. In fact, when this becomes a monument, I think it'd be wonderful to bring some of those things back to show off when it's a national monument. They found other things. They found new species. There's a cave called Conkling Cavern, and they found a four-horned antelope there, much like today's. and it's named Stockoceras conklingi, after this guy Conkling that found it.
So there's all this that predates
Exactly,
history, and then I
exactly.
understand there's also things that are closer to our time, right?
That's right.
That you can find
in
out
fact,
there.
the earliest Americans probably overlapped with that 10 to 14,000 years ago. And then, of course, there's Native Americans of various types since then. And then you get into when the Spanish started coming up from Mexico and even Central America, I think mid-1500s and late 1500s is when they first encountered the people that were already here. So the Spanish were here, kind of making small outposts and things like that, priests setting up religious sites, until, let's say, the early 1800s. And then Mexico won their independence from Spain around 1820. All of this travel was going on in the Camino Real, and if you look at the four pieces of the monument, the Camino Real goes right up the center. Not any part of the monument, but through the different pieces that are not connected. After the Camino Real, you get into when the land was in conflict between the United States and Mexico. So close to the mid-1800s, that happened, and you started getting more European influence here.
There's things from World War II.
Oh
in there
yeah,
as well,
that's
yeah.
exactly right. So you get into the Apache conflict periods, you get into the Civilian Conservation Corps. There are these aerial targets. I had a tremendous experience this last year. I was literally looking at Google Earth and trying to follow the Butterfield Trail, and I saw this bullseye thing looking there. And a friend told me what it was. It was a bombing target from World War II. There was a secret mission here to train people on using the Norden bomb site. And that was the thing that was like the first computerized thing. It was an autopilot for aircraft. This gentleman, Bill Greenberg, who lives in Tucson, came over and we flew over the area. And he was amazed at the fact that you could still see these targets that he trained on when he was there, and in fact was able to point out the outline of a ship on the ground that I don't think anyone else was aware of. Well, Mr. Greenberg got shot down by Japanese Zeros over the Pacific. And one of the things he did as these young men were jumping out of the plane was take out his service revolver and put 2 bullets into that Norden bomb site so that it wouldn't fall into enemy hands. He now is the last remaining survivor from his flight crew. And when we were flying over, he told me, David, we need to preserve these things. We need to preserve them so that young people today and future generations have this tangible connection to that period in our history.
Well, now, right now, the federal budget is very tight, and there's barely enough money to fund existing parks and existing monuments. And so, how is it that we can spend more on creating an additional monument, especially when New Mexico already got a national monument last year in Rio Grande del Norte? And considering that in the Senator's bill, it's such a large chunk of land, 500,000 acres. That's much larger than White Sands or Carlsbad Caverns. So how do you justify the expense of creating a new monument for such a large area of land?
I guess first I'd have to say I'm at a loss to understand why you think there's a new expense. When it becomes a monument again, they're not putting a fence around it, they're not building something, they're going to manage it the same way they manage it today. So if there's a new expense, it's not something that I'm aware of. Now, frankly, just as you'd like more budget for your activities, I think the BLM would love to have a larger budget to manage the lands that they already have. But the process will be the same. And so I don't know that there will be a bigger expense. And in fact, I think it'll bring revenue, including tax revenue, to Dona County. So I think it's actually an economic plus.
Okay. And I mean, some say the land is so remote, it won't ever be developed out there. I mean, so why go through the trouble of designating it a national monument when not everybody agrees?
Well, I'm not convinced that it won't ever be developed, but I will say that it's lands that I don't think that's the right use. These are areas where the topography is such that there are mountain peaks, and some of them are volcanic and some of them are other things. But it's not so much a matter that next week someone's going to go develop it, but I've watched as decades roll by that there continues to be this erosion. The places that I used to be able to go hunt when I was a teenager and a young man, a number of those, not all of them, I can't go to anymore. I'd like to also comment on the size issue. I think people have the misperception that this being large is in some way a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing that New Mexico is the size that it is. I don't think it's a bad thing that we have as much public land as we have. And I've tried to look at the fact that first, down in the Potrillos, that land is already a wilderness study area. I haven't heard anyone saying that's too large. It's been that way for 30 years, so it has some protection. The same thing in the Organs, there's already a wilderness study area there, and so that already has protection. So most of the things that are new are really in the Uvas region. And in that region, I think there's more history than there is anywhere else. And I also think there's potentially a bigger threat. I guess I'd say one more thing, which is my understanding is the BLM manages something like 1 million acres in Dona County. And so this is essentially saying half of that will have permanent protection. And I'm going to guess maybe 2/3 of that already has permanent protection. But when you look at the size of Dona County, that 500,000 acres that's still left, if my numbers are right, you could fit like 1.5 cities of Los Angeles in that. I think there's enough. I think there's enough land left.
Well, let's take a look at some of the pictures in the proposed monument region, and I think David, you took some of these photos. If you could tell us in the final minutes what we're looking at here.
Okay, so that is in the Potrillos. That's a little bit to the west of Magdalena Peak, and it's looking sort of to the northeast into the central part of the Potrillos.
Okay. Oh, this is cute.
Yeah, those are baby javelinas that I saw near Belltop Mountain. This was only about a month or two ago, and it was really fun. We had a dog with us, and the dog got chased by the javelinas, and the babies were left behind, and they seemed to think I was mom for a while.
Very good, very good. Well, I wish we had more time to look at more photos, but I guess people will have to go out and explore them for themselves. I'd like to thank you for coming on the show, Sheriff Garrison and David Souls. This has been Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Monica Ortiz Uribe.